She's used to scraps. That's what my sister Vanessa said. Lightly, like a joke, like it wasn't meant to hurt. But it did. God, it did. Her words slipped through the laughter of her friends, into the warmth of the house I'd stepped into after 2 years of silence. I stood there, holding a store-bought pie in shaking hands, watching as my kids were ushered toward the garage with 2 plastic chairs and a folding table. A second later, I heard it again. She's used to scraps. As if that explained everything. And I didn't say a word, because my kids were watching, and my voice, it had been buried a long time ago, but I remember the moment like it cracked something open inside me. The way Eli looked up at me, confused. The way Sophie clutched her napkin, so tightly it tore in her palm. That little sound her throat made when she whispered, "Can we still stay, Mommy?" And so I smiled. I nodded. I lied. "Of course we can, sweetheart. It's just like camping." But deep inside, something shifted, because I hadn't come for scraps, and they were about to find out. Vanessa and I weren't always like this. There was a time when she braided my hair before school, and I covered for her when she snuck out past curfew. A time when we shared everything, clothes, secrets, even dreams. But childhood is a strange filter. You grow up thinking love is shaped a certain way, sharp sometimes, loud, inconsistent. You learn to interpret silence as safety and jokes as affection. Vanessa was always the star. Bright, loud, full of flair. I was the shadow trailing behind her. Quieter, careful, always cleaning up messes without being asked. Always overcompensating for the chaos she left behind. Our parents fed the imbalance without realizing it. Vanessa got the new bike. I got the hand-me-down. She was excused for missed curfews. I was grounded for AC and chemistry. When she dropped out of college, they called it a creative detour. When I took a year off to care for my sick daughter, they said I was giving up on myself. I never questioned it, not back then. I just thought that was how love worked in our family. Uneven but permanent. Then I met Daniel. He was the first person who looked me in the eye and saw me. Not Vanessa's sister. Not the quiet girl. Not the one who always made room for others. Just me, with all my dreams, doubts, awkward jokes, and soft fears. He made me feel like I was enough just as I was. We got married in the backyard of a rental house we could barely afford, and it was the happiest day of my life. Vanessa was my maid of honor, drunk before the speeches even started. She gave a toast that mostly mentioned herself. I didn't mind. I was glowing. We had Eli 2 years later, and Sophie soon after. Life was hard, but beautiful. Daniel worked 2 jobs while I studied at night. We scrimped. We saved. We planned. We dreamed. And then, just like that, it ended. It was a rainy Tuesday when the call came. A truck ran a red light. Daniel never stood a chance. One moment, he was on his way home with a birthday balloon for Sophie. The next, I was a widow with no savings, no plan, and 2 children looking up at me like I had answers. Vanessa sent flowers. 1 arrangement. No card. She didn't call. Didn't show up at the funeral. Mom said she was coping in her own way. I didn't have time to be angry. Grief consumed everything. Days blurred into weeks. I went from clinic shifts to cleaning houses to delivering groceries just to keep the lights on. There were nights I fell asleep, still wearing my shoes. And through it all, Vanessa stayed silent. No visits. No birthday calls. Nothing. Until last month when she texted, "Hey stranger, Thanksgiving at ours. You and the kids should come. Let's reconnect. Yellow heart." I stared at the message for almost an hour. It had been years. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on. But another part, the tired, hopeful part, thought maybe this was something. Maybe she missed us. Maybe we were family again. And Eli had never stopped asking about his cousins. So I replied, yes. We arrived that afternoon. I had borrowed a dress from a friend. Sophie wore shoes a size too small. Eli carried the pumpkin pie we'd made the night before. We stood on her front porch, smiling, hopeful, cold. Vanessa opened the door with perfect lipstick and a glass of wine in her hand. The foyer behind her glowed with gold-toned decor and expensive garland. Her hair was styled like a magazine ad. She stared at us. Wow, you look different, she said. Hi, I smiled. It's good to see you. She tilted her head. You brought pie. Homemade, I said. Sophie helped. Ah, well, we're kind of full on desserts. But thanks. Then she turned to someone inside. Put them in the garage. There's more space. And then, she's used to scraps. It hit me in waves. Not just the insult, but the way no one even flinched. As if this was normal. As if I belonged out of sight. The garage was set up like a joke. 2 lawn chairs. A plastic table with a single napkin dispenser. A space heater that sputtered like it was dying. Someone had moved a mop bucket aside to make room. A spider clung to the wall near the window. Sophie shivered. Eli rubbed his arms. I tried to smile. I really did. And then came the deeper sting. From the dining room, I could hear them laughing, clinking glasses, shouting across the table like we weren't even part of it. Not once did anyone check on us. Not once did a cousin wave or sneak a roll to the garage. We were invisible, but I watched. I watched Vanessa, watched how she held court at the table, throwing her head back in laughter. Watched her husband, Craig, talk about stocks and wine pairings. Watched my mother smile at a joke I couldn't hear. And something inside me began to calcify. This wasn't about space. This was about shame. She was ashamed of me, of my grief, my survival, my scraped-together life, of the way I showed up, still standing, still raising 2 kids on my own. And instead of pride or compassion, she chose mockery. It wasn't new, not really. She had always needed to be better, always needed to be the sun, no matter how many shadows it cast. But now I was done. I didn't have much left in me. But what I had, I was going to use. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for truth. And the truth was buried in something my father once told me when I was 16, wiping tears off my cheek after Vanessa crashed my bike and blamed me. You may not get the spotlight, he'd said, but one day you'll get the last word. I didn't know what he meant back then, but I was about to find out. I used to dream of quiet things. Not fame. Not wealth. Just a little garden. A back porch with chipped paint. A kitchen filled with the smell of cinnamon and soap. I dreamed of slow mornings, Daniel at the stove, kids still tangled in sleep, sunlight pouring through sheer curtains. I used to believe that kind of life was enough. And for a while, it was Daniel. And I had very little, but our love made it feel like everything. Our first apartment had peeling wallpaper and a stove that hissed every time we lit it. The floorboards creaked when you stepped too hard in the hallway, and the hot water came in bursts. But every night we sat on the floor eating noodles out of mismatched bowls, laughing over nothing, making promises we could barely afford to keep. We made it work, week by week, paycheck by paycheck. When Eli was born, Daniel sold his motorcycle to buy us a second-hand crib. When Sophie came, I stitched her baby clothes from old flannel shirts. Our home was a patchwork of hand-me-downs and hope, but it was ours. Daniel was my anchor. He believed in me more than I believed in myself. He told me I was brilliant, told me I should have gone to law school. I told him we couldn't afford it. He told me we'd figure it out. And we did, at least for a while. I started taking online classes while working part-time at the clinic. He picked up extra shifts. We traded exhaustion like currency, but our life had direction. Our struggle had purpose. I wanted to build a future for our kids, a stable, secure life where no one would ever say scraps in their direction. A life where they could grow up with dignity and space to dream. That future vanished the day he died. After Daniel's funeral, I remember standing in the doorway of our apartment, staring at the rent notice pinned crookedly to the frame. Eli was inside watching cartoons. Sophie was napping on the couch, clutching Daniel's old t-shirt like it could bring him back. And I was hollow. Grief is strange like that. It doesn't come in a wave. It seeps in slowly, like smoke under the door, until you realize you've been choking for days. I tried to hold it all together. For them. For me. But some mornings I couldn't even get out of bed. And when I did, it felt like walking through molasses. The world kept moving. Bills kept coming. And no one stopped to ask if I was okay. Vanessa didn't call. Not once. My mother came by a few times, mostly out of obligation. She'd bring bags of groceries and say things like, "Maybe you should move in with Vanessa. She has more space." As if space was ever what I needed. What I needed was someone to look me in the eye and say, "I see you. I see how hard you're trying." But no one did. So I worked. Nights, weekends, whatever I could find. I delivered meals, cleaned houses, walked dogs, packed groceries. The money barely covered rent. Eli's shoes had holes. Sophie had one winter coat that didn't quite zip. And still, I tried to make our home feel like a home. On Christmas Eve, I bought a tiny tree from a lot that was closing down. The vendor gave it to me for $5. We decorated it with paper snowflakes and popcorn strings. The kids were thrilled. That night, Eli hugged me and whispered, "This is the best Christmas ever." And I cried in the bathroom with the faucet running, so they wouldn't hear me. The thing is, I didn't want anyone's pity. I just wanted to be seen. I just wanted someone to say, "You don't deserve to be forgotten." When Vanessa's invitation came, it felt like a sliver of light. Maybe things were changing. Maybe she had softened. Maybe she realized we were still family. I clung to that hope like a rope in a storm. I told the kids we were going to see their cousins. I borrowed a friend's car. I even bought a bottle of wine we couldn't really afford. But the moment I stepped through her front door, I knew. The house looked like a magazine spread. Marble counters, crystal, glassware, everything curated for display. Her children wore matching sweaters. Her husband had the charisma of a politician. The music playing in the background was soft jazz, expensive sounding, polished. Even the smell of the place, cinnamon and pine, was deliberate, and we didn't belong. Vanessa greeted other guests with long hugs, playful teasing, laughter that echoed through the entryway. When she turned to us, her expression flickered just long enough for me to see it, the disappointment. "Wow, you came?" she said. I held out the pie. "We did." She took it without looking. "We've got a lot of dessert already. But thanks." I opened my mouth, searching for warmth, for familiarity. But she had already turned her back. That was the first crack. The second came when she waved toward the garage. "You'll be more comfortable out there. More space for the kids." I hesitated. "Out there? It's not a big deal. We're packed in here. I didn't plan for extras." Extras. As if we weren't family. As if we were an afterthought. The third crack came when I saw the garage itself. No heat. No plates. No decor. Just 2 chairs and a table next to a pile of broken down boxes. Someone had tried to sweep, but dust still clung to every corner. I could see oil stains on the floor. Sophie looked at me, eyes wide. "Is this where we're eating?" I swallowed. "It's kind of like a picnic." Eli sat down quietly. He was always the quiet one. He never said much, but his silence spoke volumes. He poked at his green beans with the edge of a plastic fork. From inside, I heard clinking glasses. Someone gave a toast. I sat with them in that garage, trying to pretend it didn't matter. But every second felt heavier than the last. And then came the words. "She's used to scraps." Said in passing. Said like a joke. But it cut like a blade. The guests inside laughed politely. And I stared at the door. That was when I knew. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't about space. This was her way of putting me in my place. Of reminding everyone what I'd become. And in that moment, something deeper than sadness took root inside me. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was something colder. Something clearer. I hadn't come to be humiliated. I had come because I believed in redemption, in second chances, in the idea that family could still mean something. But Vanessa didn't want that. She wanted an audience, and I had given her one. After the meal, when we were packing up our things in the darkened garage, I noticed something odd. A pile of old documents, trash probably tucked in a bin labeled dad stuff. It must have been boxes from our childhood home, left there after our father passed. I lifted the lid, curious. There was a file inside, faded, yellowed. I flipped through it without thinking, and then stopped. Deed paperwork, legal documents, my name, on the property title. I stared at it in disbelief. It didn't make sense at first. I thought it was a mistake, but there it was, my father's signature, the notary stamp, the date. It had been transferred to me years ago, long before Vanessa moved in. I stood frozen in that garage, my children already asleep in the car, the wind picking up outside. I read it again, and slowly something inside me began to burn. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about everything. She had known. She had found this paperwork. Or maybe our mother told her. Either way, she had kept it quiet. She had taken a house that didn't belong to her and claimed it as her own. While I struggled, while I delivered groceries in the rain, while I patched Eli's shoes with tape, she threw dinner parties in a house with my name on it. She made jokes about scraps on a property that was legally mine. My breath caught in my chest. My hands trembled, but I didn't rage. I didn't scream. Instead, I smiled. A strange, calm smile, because now I knew what I had to do. I held the folder like it was made of glass. The paper inside wasn't just old. It felt sacred, heavy with the weight of truth, of choices my father made in silence. I could still see his signature, strong and slanted, at the bottom of the page. The name above it read Madison Claire Ellis. My name, not Vanessa's. This house, the one where I had just been fed on a plastic plate in a freezing garage, was mine. And she knew. She must have known. There were only two people our father would have told, me or her, but he died before I ever heard a word. Vanessa had cleaned out his papers while I was still numb with grief, handling arrangements, answering calls, being the organized one while I held my kids, and tried to survive the funeral. Now I saw it for what it was. She'd found the title, the deed, the truth, and she said nothing. She moved in, renovated, remodeled, repainted memories she had no right to touch. She built her dream over the grave of mine, and then had the audacity to mock me from the head of the table. She's used to scraps. That wasn't a throwaway comment. That was branding. That was how she had explained me to her friends, her husband, even to our mother, the way you speak about something you've already dismissed. I was no longer a sister to her. I was a character, the family cautionary tale, the one who couldn't keep a husband, couldn't hold a career, couldn't stay afloat. And yet here I was, holding legal proof that the kingdom she ruled from wasn't even hers. I should have been furious, should have marched into that dining room, thrown the papers on the table, and watched the candles flicker in chaos. But I didn't, because I knew something she didn't. I knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to be underestimated. I knew how to move silently in rooms that ignored me. And now, I had something stronger than anger. I had leverage. I drove home that night without a word. The kids fell asleep in the back seat, unaware. My hand stayed at 10, and 2 on the wheel, my heart a steady drum in my chest. When I pulled into the driveway of our tiny apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I laid them gently in their beds, kissed their foreheads, and sat down at the kitchen table. And I started planning. The first step was research. I didn't trust emotion to carry this. I needed facts. I needed protection. So I went to the public records office during lunch breaks. I requested copies of everything: the will, the property history, even the original transfer documents. My father had named me sole beneficiary of the property 3 years before he died. The signature was valid. The witness was real. The notary was licensed. There was no doubt. The house was mine. Vanessa had no legal claim. The second step was finding a lawyer, someone quiet, experienced, unbothered by family drama. I found her in a dusty office near the courthouse. Her name was Brenda McCall. She wore gray suits and didn't smile often. But she listened, and when I handed her the papers, her eyes lit up with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Your sister's occupying this house illegally, she said. We can move on this fast. Quietly. Do you want to file for an eviction order? I shook my head. Not yet, I said. I want her to hand over the keys herself. Brenda narrowed her eyes. And how do you plan to do that? I smiled. I'll let her throw a party. Vanessa's life was built on illusion. She didn't want the house. She wanted what the house gave her: status, applause, power. She loved nothing more than showing off her curated perfection. So I knew she'd have another event soon. A birthday, a fundraiser, something where her whole circle would be watching. That would be the moment. And I would be ready. While Brenda prepared the official paperwork, I waited. I watched Vanessa's social media like a hawk. She posted her life like a catalog, curated, filtered, dripping in performance. So when she announced her annual winter gala, an event she'd hosted every year for Craig's colleagues and local influencers, I knew it was coming. This year's winter gala is going to be unforgettable, she wrote in the caption, posing in front of a towering tree in the foyer. Can't wait to welcome our dearest friends into our home again. Dizzy #blessed, holiday glow, #grateful. Unforgettable, indeed. 2 days before the party, I called Brenda. Serve the documents, I said, but wait until the night of. She paused. You want the delivery to happen at the party? Yes, I said, right in the middle. Brenda let out a breath. That's bold. No, I said, smiling. It's fair. Then I picked up a dress from a local thrift shop, black velvet, elegant, simple. I pressed it carefully and hung it in my closet. The night of the party, I hired a babysitter for Eli and Sophie. I told them Mommy had an errand to run. I didn't tell them it would be the last night their aunt ever looked down on us. I arrived 5 minutes after the first wave of guests. Vanessa's house glowed from the windows, golden light spilling onto the lawn, music floating through the cracks, laughter bouncing off champagne glasses. Cars lined the street. A valet stood near the driveway, clipboard in hand. I walked up with calm steps, holding nothing but a small leather clutch and a folded letter inside. He gave me a polite nod. Name: Madison Ellis. The moment the words left my mouth, something shifted. He looked at the clipboard, then at me. I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't see your name. I smiled. That's all right. I'm not on the guest list. I'm the owner. Before he could respond, Brenda's assistant stepped up behind me, a tall man in a sharp suit, holding a briefcase. He leaned toward me. Ready? I nodded. It's time. We walked up the steps together. Inside, Vanessa was glowing in gold. A cocktail dress that hugged her frame, laughter on her lips, a glass of wine balanced in one hand. She was speaking to a group of men in suits, her voice animated, full of charm. She turned and saw me. Her smile didn't fade, not immediately, but her eyes flickered. Confusion, then recognition, then unease. I stepped forward. Vanessa. She blinked. Madison, you came. I glanced around. Beautiful party. I didn't know you were coming. I know. Beside me, Brenda's assistant opened the briefcase and pulled out the documents. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, precise movement. He handed them to Vanessa. Her brows furrowed. What's this? Notice of possession, he said, per the enclosed documents. This property has been held in violation of legal ownership. Effective immediately, you are required to vacate within 72 hours. Legal filings have been submitted. The room quieted. People turned. Conversations stalled. Her fingers shook as she flipped through the pages. This is some kind of joke. I stepped closer, my voice calm. It's not. I live here, she said, almost laughing. This is my house. No, I replied gently. It's mine. It always was. You can't do this. You did it first. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I simply stood in the truth and let it do what truth always does. It made people uncomfortable. It made liars sweat. And it set me free. The room was dead silent. Her husband stepped forward, glanced at the papers, then back at her. You said this was your house. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I turned and walked out. No applause. No cheers. Just the sound of a woman realizing the party was over. The silence after I walked out was the loudest thing I'd heard in years. Even before I reached the sidewalk, I could feel it behind me, the tension stretching across that glittering living room like a pulled thread, the sound of masks slipping, champagne glasses being set down, questions rising behind polite whispers. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had already lived in the shadows of that house long enough, laughed too softly so others could laugh louder, dimmed my voice so others could shine. For years, I let Vanessa paint over me, and I let her call it love. But that night, as the winter air met my skin and my heels clicked softly down the stone steps, I felt it all falling away. The shame, the years of silence, the lie she built her life on. It was crumbling, not because I screamed, not because I made a scene, but because I simply told the truth. And the truth didn't flinch. The next morning, my phone lit up with messages. Not from Vanessa, not from Craig, not from our mother, but from the fringes, the cousins who'd watched from the couch, the neighbor who'd once whispered that Vanessa had a flair for exaggeration, the uncle who hadn't spoken to me since Daniel's funeral. All of them wanted one thing now, the real story. But I didn't reply, because this wasn't a performance. It wasn't revenge. It was real. And real doesn't need applause. Instead, I made pancakes for Eli and Sophie. We ate slowly without rush. I didn't mention the party. I didn't tell them the house would be ours soon. I just let them laugh over syrup and take extra whipped cream, knowing that soon, very soon, they'd never have to eat in a garage again. For Vanessa, the fallout began the moment the door closed behind me. Brenda called me 2 days later. She called me hysterical, she said, tapping her pen against the desk. Tried to argue the paperwork was fake. Claimed your dad must have made a mistake. And I reminded her that the county court didn't think so. The will was valid. The title transfer was clean. The notary stamp was still registered. Legally, there's no case for her. I paused. And the deadline? She has 48 hours left. I nodded slowly. Let her use every one. Brenda smiled. You're not going to press charges for squatting? No, I said. I want her to carry the weight of what she did. Quietly, personally. Dignified, she said. No, I replied. Decisive. That evening, I received an email from Vanessa. It was long, rambling, defensive. She claimed she hadn't known. That dad had told her something different, that she had just assumed, that I had always been the favored one, secretly, that I didn't understand what it felt like to be the family disappointment. I didn't reply. Some people don't want reconciliation. They want release from guilt, from consequence. I wasn't going to give her either. Instead, I printed the email and filed it in the same folder where the deed lived now. A reminder that truth doesn't require permission. The public exposure rippled through our family like a cold wave. My mother called. Finally, 3 days after the eviction was served. Her voice was tight, strained, almost annoyed. I wish you would have told me, she said. I tried. I replied gently. Years ago, you didn't want to hear it. She sighed. Vanessa's upset. I imagine she is. She says you're trying to humiliate her. No, I said. She did that herself. There was a pause. She's still your sister. No, I said again. She's not. Blood might bind us genetically, but choice binds us emotionally. And Vanessa had made hers a long time ago. You always think you're so righteous, my mother muttered. No, I said quietly. I just stopped lying. She didn't call again. And I didn't chase the silence. Because for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Moving day came without ceremony. Vanessa left before the deadline expired, without a word. I don't know where she went, to a friend's, maybe a hotel. Craig wasn't with her when she left. There were rumors whispered through extended family that he was furious that he'd lost a client after the party, that their marriage had begun to crack under the weight of embarrassment. I didn't ask. I didn't care. The only thing that mattered was that the keys were waiting in a plain envelope at Brenda's office, tied with a small blue ribbon and a sticky note that read, Good luck, Madison. I stood outside the house for a long time that first afternoon. It looked different now. Smaller, less intimidating. The glamour Vanessa had added was already fading, as if it knew its purpose had expired. I stepped inside with Eli and Sophie. They gasped in unison. Is this ours? Sophie asked, eyes wide. I nodded. Yes, baby. It's ours now. Eli walked slowly through the living room, running his fingers along the wall. It smells like cinnamon, he said. I smiled. It won't for long. They raced through the halls, claiming rooms, opening closets. I followed behind, not touching anything yet, just watching, just breathing. In the garage, I found the 2 folding chairs still stacked in the corner. And I laughed, a full, free laugh that rose from somewhere deep in my chest. I dragged them out to the curb and left them by the trash. No more scraps. But fallout never ends neatly. The first week we moved in, someone left a message on the mailbox in thick black marker. Thief. I stared at it for a long time. Then I went inside, found a rag, and wiped it clean. The next week, a mutual friend from high school posted something cryptic on social media. Funny how some people climb by stepping on family. I didn't respond. The truth didn't change, and neither did the peace that now lived in my bones. We painted the walls, bought new curtains. Eli helped me plant lavender in the backyard. Sophie taped drawings to the fridge. Every night, we lit candles in the kitchen, not for style, but for warmth, for memory, for presence. One evening, I found a box in the attic. Inside was an old note from my father, folded carefully, hidden in a Bible he must have left behind. To my Maddie, the quiet one with the strongest spine. This house is yours. Not because you asked, but because you endured. I sat on the attic floor and let myself cry, not from grief, but from release. Consequences don't always come the way we imagine them. They don't crash like thunder or arrive wrapped in headlines. Sometimes they show up in silence, in lost trust, in emptied rooms, in the absence of loyalty where it used to live. That's what happened to Vanessa. Her reputation didn't collapse overnight. It eroded quietly. Invitations stopped coming. Friends began to distance themselves. The story she told about her generosity, her success, her perfect life no longer landed the same, because people remembered the night of the party, the silence when the papers were read aloud, the way her smile faded, how her voice caught. It didn't matter how she spun it afterward. She had been caught pretending on borrowed ground. And people remember that. I heard through a distant cousin that Craig moved out not long after we settled into the house. The marriage didn't survive the humiliation. She had built her image too tightly around him. The perfect power couple, the curated home, the glossy social circle. Once one piece unraveled, the whole thing frayed. He left. She stayed in a small apartment across town. I never asked where. She didn't contact me again. Our mother kept trying to thread the pieces back together. She sent passive-aggressive voicemails, then tried guilt, then silence again. Eventually, even she stopped trying. I think deep down, she knew she'd failed us both, in different ways. But for me, it was over. There was nothing left to salvage. Some things break quietly and stay broken. Our house felt different as the months passed. It was never about the square footage or the crown molding or the zip code. It was about the shift in air, the feeling of being seen, the feeling of being home. We filled the walls with sound again. Sophie's morning chatter, Eli's late-night humming, the soft scrape of my feet across the kitchen floor as I made cocoa in the dark. We filled the rooms with second-hand furniture and first-class joy. We didn't match. We didn't care. We were whole. I took a job working remotely for a legal aid nonprofit. Brenda helped me land the interview, and when the director asked why I was interested, I said, because I know what it feels like to be silenced, and I want to help other people find their voice. They hired me on the spot. Eli started playing piano. Sophie joined a gardening club at school. On weekends, we baked muffins and fed the birds that gathered on the windowsill. On Sundays, we had pancake breakfasts on the front porch, something Daniel always wanted to do but never had time for. And sometimes in the quiet of night, I sat on the back steps alone, just breathing, just existing, without shame, without performance, without needing to shrink so someone else could shine. One morning, I found something on the doorstep. It was a small envelope, no name on the front. Inside, a photograph, one I hadn't seen in years. Me and Vanessa as kids, sitting under the backyard tree in our old home, knees scraped, arms wrapped around each other like lifelines. On the back, in shaky handwriting, we were good once. I'm sorry I forgot that. V. I held it for a long time. My heart didn't leap. It didn't ache. It just settled. Because I didn't need her to be my sister again. I just needed her to remember I was never the enemy. And maybe now she finally did. I placed the photo in the bottom drawer of my desk next to the old deed and my father's letter. Not to forget, but to remember how far I'd come. It was spring when I hosted our first family dinner in the house. Not the kind with place cards or polished silver. Just a table covered in mismatched plates, paper napkins, and food made with love. I invited a few friends from the clinic, Sophie's favorite teacher, Brenda and her assistant, and the neighbor next door who always brought cookies when we moved in. No one wore heels. No one brought judgment. We laughed until the candles melted. Eli played piano in the background, soft and shy. Sophie passed out brownies. She made herself. And I watched it all from the head of the table, not because I needed to be seen, but because I finally believed I belonged there. After everyone left, I walked through the house, barefoot. I passed by the garage, now empty except for a row of gardening tools and a shelf of paints. The folding chairs were gone. The shame was gone. The memory, still there. But it no longer hurt. It had transformed into something else. Proof that I had lived through it and risen. One night, I stood in the kitchen long after the kids had gone to bed. The window was open. A breeze carried in the scent of jasmine from the garden. The house was quiet, but not empty. I poured myself a cup of tea, and I thought about all the times I'd swallowed my voice to keep the peace. All the moments I stayed quiet so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. All the times I was told to be grateful for crumbs, for pity, for scraps. But no more, because now I understood there is nothing noble about staying silent in the face of injustice, especially from those who call themselves family. And there is nothing shameful about wanting more, wanting fairness, dignity, respect, love that doesn't punish you for needing space at the table. I lit a candle and placed it on the window ledge. A small ritual, a prayer of sorts, not for vengeance, not for reconciliation, but for peace. For every woman who has ever been pushed into the garage and told it was a favor. For every mother who swallowed tears so her children wouldn't taste them. For every sister who was made to feel like a shadow. I see you. I was you. And now I sit at the head of my own table. And no one, not blood, not bitterness, not betrayal, can take that from me again.